Members take their seats. We're going to get started in the next portion of our work session today, which is our AI future in Fairfax County Public Schools. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Reed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lady. And I really am excited this afternoon. I know the board's been very excited too to talk about artificial intelligence and all of the potential. And I'm thrilled that this afternoon we're going to hear from one of our leaders in the field nationally. Mr. Sethi will introduce him in a moment. But I really want to manage expectations for this afternoon. I feel like sometimes, we start this conversation and it's a ginormous topic, AI, right? You can't open a news release of any type without seeing some article, good, bad, otherwise, about it. And so in managing expectations for today's conversation, I'm really looking forward to this being a level setting for us as a team so that we all understand what we mean when we're talking about AI. Because I think that one of the things that Babak said when Mr. Sethi and I met with him earlier is often if we all had a bubble over our heads and we mention AI, we all think we know we're talking about the same thing, but in reality we're not. And for us to chart a path forward, I think it's important that we're all clear about definitions and what we really mean by AI and what we think about when we set a path forward. So it's a level setting today, and there is going to be opportunity for many more conversations moving forward. We're calling this topic area Meeting the Moment, and that came from that same conversation, which is the sense that we have to meet this moment as a school division, a community, and a country. And we're going to have our November 3rd evening meeting to invite our community into the conversation as we shape the future of Fairfax County Public Schools. So I will turn it over to Mr. Sethi and look forward to 90 minutes of robust conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Reed. I'm excited to have Dr. Babak Mostagami join us today. He started as a teacher in Michigan, and he worked at opening up the first AI school in Gwinnett County Public Schools, which was slightly before ChatGPT era. So clearly he's been at it, doing it for a while, and now he advises institutions publicly, privately, on the future of AI and education. So excited to have you here, Babak.
Thank you so much, Dr. Reed and Mr. Sethi, board members. It's great to be with you here today. What I'm going to do is take you through a briefing that's brief. It's going to be short. It's not going to have everything in it. But hopefully what it'll do is it'll give you a bit of a sense of the sort of basics of AI and those sorts of things. Many of you are likely to be far more technical than I am and those sorts of things, and that's great. Let's bring all that to the table. But I look forward to engaging in this conversation and laying the landscape of what's going on right now around AI in education, level setting around some of the AI capabilities that are out there and those sorts of things, and then grounding it in potentially a set of things to consider as you all are moving forward in Fairfax. Just by way of reminder, so I'm Babak. I'm an educator at heart. I was a 5th grade science and social studies teacher. Started off in a really rural place, but I'm originally from Blacksburg, Virginia. And I've actually had multiple cousins who live in the Vienna, Fairfax area, and they've been through your schools. They turned out all right, so I appreciate that. I hope they're watching this and seeing that. You guys did a really great job, so thank you. They're all younger than I am, so I can sort of rib them on that. So I really appreciate you all, and I do want to make sure that I say that while we're going to be talking about AI today, we're primarily going to be talking about a world infused with AI. And so it's going to be about the technology, but really about the world that our kids are going into, and kind of going from there. Does that make sense? All right, so let's start off. So if you look at this picture right here, a lot of people look at it and go, oh, that's a weird picture to put up first. And here's what's going on right here. Does anybody know what's going on right here? Am I allowed to ask that question? Well, they're not exactly jumping off. They're being pushed off the cliff, right? And so what happens oftentimes with penguins is that they get on these big ice shelves, and in order to test the water for safety, they all sort of shove and push and pull until some fall in. Then they all look to see if something has eaten them or not. And if nothing has eaten them, then the rest jump in, right? And so, so here's the deal. So typically when you get in an AI conversation these days, you have people who come talk to you who are at the very back. Notice the ones who are like laying down in the back and like not doing anything. And they're like, oh yeah, go jump, like go do the thing. I am not that person, okay? So as Mr. Sethi said, I and my entire team, when I was back in Gwinnett County Public Schools, we've been swimming in the water for quite a bit. And there's a lot that we can learn from that experience and to help grow the entire sort of country on. And so I just want to make sure you guys know that this isn't coming from a theoretical space, but from a place where we've done a lot of what I'm talking about with kids, for kids, with families and communities and those sorts of things. So let's dive right on in. One of the biggest challenges that Dr. Reed pointed out at the beginning is that we are typically having 3 separate conversations around AI at the same time, which makes it really, really difficult to have the full conversation. Conversation 1 is about future readiness of students for an AI-infused world, okay? So this includes whether or not kids know and understand AI tools, but it also includes deeply human skills around, do you know how to collaborate with other people? Do you know how to communicate with one another and those sorts of things? And so future readiness of students is one of those conversations, but often one that goes ignored. The second one is a conversation around tools with AI in them. And these are specifically tools that are used to support student learning. So you might have a vendor or something saying, oh, we have this great AI tool that supports reading or math or whatever it is, right? But sometimes and oftentimes the child or the adult doesn't even know that there's AI in the tool. But the conversation is around an AI tool for kids. The third set of conversations is around AI tools to support adults, right? And so these are things that can support teachers directly. So for example, supporting lesson planning and building content and rubrics and those sorts of things. But they can also be used by like research and evaluation folks to run big data sets, all those sorts of things, and to keep things going. So before we get into any of these conversations, though, I think it's really important to ground ourselves in the purpose of public education. And for me, that purpose is to inspire and prepare young people for their future, which I'm defining as flourishing in life, career, and democracy. There are a lot of different ways you can sort of cut that across and those sorts of things, but fundamentally when we talk about the parts of a person's life in the future, I think a lot of it falls in these buckets. The challenge, though, is that we're leading in a rare moment where AI is fundamentally impacting life, career, and democracy in ways that were previously unimaginable. And so what that means for us is that means that we need to update and upgrade our systems, our classrooms, and our lessons for this AI-infused world. Notice that I'm saying upgrade and update. I'm not saying throw away. I'm not saying reinvent the entire thing. What I'm talking about is making sure that we're meeting the purpose of education that we already believe in. Now, many people, when confronted with this, are like, oh yeah, okay, so like this a ways off. Like it's far away. But the future is already in our hallways, right? Children beginning kindergarten this fall will graduate in 2038, right? So a question that comes to mind is, are we preparing them for today or for 2038? A child entering 6th grade will graduate from high school in 2032. A child that's born today will graduate from college in 2042, right? And so realistically, the question that literally keeps me up every single night is, are we preparing children for their future? And by their future, we're at this point talking about the 2030s, 40s, 50s, and beyond, right? In some instances, people are already talking about the 22nd century. That scares me too much as a guy who has a 13-year-old and a 9-year-old. I'm like, hold on, let's finish out this century strong and then look forward, right? But the important thing to note is the big question of, are we preparing young people, children, for that future that they're going to have or are present? So to ground us really quickly and briefly on what is AI, because AI is and isn't a lot of things to a lot of different people. AI is a technology that enables computers and machines to simulate human learning, comprehension, problem-solving, decision-making, creativity, and autonomy. I say that word simulate on purpose because it is not conscious, it is not human-like, it is simulating. And the form of AI that we're going to primarily talk about today is called generative AI, which is a type of AI that uses, that builds new content using existing text, video, code, and images. But the thing that it's creating is fundamentally new in certain ways. If you look at the chart on the right, you see that there are all different types of AI out there. These are some of them, right? Everything from virtual companions to robotic personal assistants to machine learning and autonomous systems. There are a lot of different pieces at work. Today, we're going to be primarily talking about generative AI. So the question of the day that I get from a lot of people is, are things really changing or is it hype, right? We always hear about the hype cycle, so let's jump into it. So piece number one, thinking about life, career, and democracy, right? AI is transforming life in real ways. On the left-hand side, you see some negative ways. You see some Gen Zers who would marry an AI in AI relationships, right? You see people having their closest relationships and companions with chatbots. You see the environmental aspects of AI and the environmental risks that come from a lot of the data processing and those sorts of things. At the same time, though, on the right side, you see some of the very positive things. You have organizations like Course Mojo and Amira Learning who have built really remarkable use cases in the education space for augmenting and supporting educators in what we want to do. Everything from supporting dyslexia screening to differentiating classroom environments in real human-based ways. At the same time, in medicine, you have AI proving that they can outperform doctors in terms of medical diagnosis, which can be rather incredible. Imagine if you can detect lung cancer many months or years before a human eye could. That could really be beneficial to our system and our world. At the bottom, we have a really neat tractor. And what is there? Usually people go, oh, but there's someone driving the tractor. Yeah, I'm not talking about autonomous driving tractors. In this case, AI is being used to look and identify weeds in the soil. And those weeds are then zapped by a laser that destroys the weed without the use of pesticides or chemicals and those sorts of things. So think about the positive things that could happen if we didn't have to use those things in our food production processes. At the same time, AI is transforming careers, right? So you have Goldman Sachs saying that 2/3 of current jobs are exposed to some sort of automation. McKinsey Global Institute is talking about 30% of activities and 60% of occupations that could be automated. Really, things are changing. Now, for people who are like, I don't actually believe those statements, let's just look much more directly. These forecasts are no longer theoretical. In Accenture, they've said employees who can't be retrained for AI will be exited. Shopify is talking about how AI proficiency is now baseline and built into performance reviews. Duolingo has specifically said no new hires unless teams prove that AI can't do the work. Walmart is talking about how AI is going to change literally every job and talking about how headcount will remain flat despite growth plans as roles are eliminated or transformed. So these challenges and positive opportunities with careers really are coming to fore and much faster than anticipated. At the same time, AI is transforming democracy. And so on the left hand, you have the positive. So there are really interesting use cases of AI to foster a more inclusive democracy, to make it so that they can find zones of agreement between people who seem very, very far apart and might not figure out those zones. Similarly, it can be used to improve citizens' quality of life by making it so that citizens can, so that government can be more reactive and transparent to what the citizen needs are. On the right side, though, you see some of the cases where AI can be really problematic for democracy and for community as a whole. You'll see the LA Times article at the bottom that's where I highlighted roughly 7% of Americans use AI chatbots and interfaces for news each week. That can be highly problematic if people aren't at a minimum looking at their own news sources themselves. We have big shifts in election disinformation across the world happening as a result of AI-created disinformation. I have two images on here. The one on the left is, you'll see, I think that's Rachel Maddow. There are a couple other famous people helping flood victims in Texas. None of these pictures are real. They're all artificially generated, but they spread like wildfire on platforms like Facebook and Instagram and those sorts of things, and Twitter, because people thought they were real. Now, those you might go, well, obviously those are fake, but look at the picture on the right. The picture on the right was also shared from the Texas floods recently. And at first focus, you're like, oh yeah, that could be reasonable. Oh my gosh, look at all that damage. But when you look closely at that circled thing, that is a two-fronted truck, right? I have never seen a two-fronted truck that's been working, right? And you might go, well, that's innocuous. But the challenge is that when a person sees that, even when they're shown and told that it's fake, they go, yeah, that image might be fake. But there are probably a whole bunch of real ones that are similar to this. And so it essentially is used to confirm people's existing biases. Now, the bottom line to all of this, and I'm going to quote an old Gwinnett Good thing, which is that AI and future readiness have to be for everyone, and I really deeply believe that districts have to lead the way. And so that readiness we would talk about in Gwinnett as no one's allowed to drown in the future infused with AI. That means everyone needs to swim, most people need to be able to snorkel, And a much larger and diverse set of people need to scuba dive in this world. They need to be the creators of AI in ways that meet the diverse needs of the community and not just the likes of a small group of people. So let's get to some of the current capabilities of AI so that we can sort of level set on what things can currently do or what they're forecast to do. So AI is able to do increasingly complex tasks. So some of the headlines. First is that AI deep research, which is a relatively new development, can conduct years of PhD levels of research in mere hours. That mere hours is starting to become minutes, like everything is becoming faster and more precise over time. The second thing is that AI agents, apologies for the numbering, AI agents are autonomously tackling tasks and collaborating with one another to accomplish the complex tasks. So think about it this way. There is a traditional form of AI where you can like ask it a question and it answers. Then there is generative AI, Gen AI, that understands what's being thrown at it and answers accordingly. There's a new form of agentic AI, which is more fully autonomous, meaning, for example, if I visit a website and have to make travel accommodations, it could actually do that for me, soup to nuts, based on parameters that I give it ahead of time. So you're no longer necessarily talking about a chat interface, you're talking about deep capabilities that can get really important and useful work done. At the same time, chatbots are being replaced with multimodal AI that listens, speaks, and sees. So the chat interface is starting to go away, and most new forms of AI are actually spoken to, and they speak back. They can see what's going on in a room. They can make interpretations and inferences about emotion and those sorts of things. And these capabilities are starting to significantly shift how we interact with AI and what can come of it. Finally, major advances are coming in the next 18 months, right? Developers in Anthropic, and notice the dates on this. By late 2025 and into 2027, these are what they believe will exist. AI systems that will match intellectual capabilities of Nobel Prize winners across multiple domains. AI that can navigate all interfaces available to humans, meaning like websites, everything on your computer, Microsoft Word, Office, PowerPoint, all those sorts of things. AI that can reason through complex tasks over hours, days, and weeks, which means it can do far more complicated things than a quick chat type now. And finally, AI that can interface with the physical world through robotics, meaning that the AI is no longer stuck behind the screen, but can actually interface with human beings through robotic capabilities. Now, what does this mean for us? That's a lot. I can see your faces. I agree, right? And anyone who sees this stuff and just jumps right in isn't being cautious enough. And make sure that you hear everything I say, not as a, let's do everything all at once, all of a sudden. Everything needs to be done with caution and with student safety in mind, but also with ensuring student readiness for the future. What are some of these implications for education? There are lots of implications for education, right? But let's start off. Thing number one, I would assert, is that we need to engage in all three of these AI conversations. So most of the time, our AI conversations stop at the tool. Like, oh, are you using insert name of tool in your building? If so, then you're like doing AI. If not, you're not. That's not the case, right? We really have to center talking about the future readiness of young people, which actually we do already in most of our buildings, talking about the tools with AI in them, and talking about the AI use cases and supports for adults. A second piece is that our learning systems need to center the readiness skills young people need for an AI-infused future. It's really hard to read, but if you look at this chart closely, this is from the World Economic Forum, and it's a chart that shows the sort of skills on the rise and skills on the decline from the World Economic Forum. So if you look at the very, very top, which is small on our screen, you'll notice that the top thing is not reading, writing, and math. The top skill that they have listed, give me a second to pull it up where I can read it, is AI and big data. Thank you. Next, followed by networks and cybersecurity, you have things like creative thinking, analytical thinking, all that sort of stuff. Down towards the bottom of the list is reading, writing, and mathematics, right? Now, the reason I say that is not the, oh my gosh, is he saying we don't need reading, writing, and math? No, that's not the case. Content knowledge, however, so reading, writing, and math has to be tethered to these other human skills, the creative thinking, the critical thinking, those sorts of things, in order to prepare young people for their future. What can't happen is that those skills just get done in isolation, or that we only teach content and don't prepare kids with the knowledge that they need. A third thing I would recommend is that I think every district ought to have a coherent AI readiness strategy. And these are not big, thick documents that never change, but nimble strategies with clear guiding principles and community engagement that can embrace a clarity of direction, but avoid the certainty of action. Meaning, people should be very clear in direction, but certainty around AI will prove you a fool, because AI changes every moment. Literally, as we're speaking, new things have come out that will likely make some of our old ideas wrong, including ones in this presentation. And the second thing is making sure to engage the public in that AI conversation to ensure that the AI doesn't become one more thing, but purposefully thinks about AI readiness and integration into the core sort of way of teaching and learning is imperative. Number 4 is that we need to increase the AI and future-ready learning experiences inside and outside of the classroom. That means active human-connected learning. It increases the importance of human skill development, teaching kids how to collaborate and partner together in learning that's connected for their lives. It means building knowledge and skills together in a tethered way. So modernize foundational knowledge with integrated skills, skills like adaptability, communication, critical thinking, creativity, to ensure that they're ready for that future. Oftentimes, these are in a portrait of a graduate or a portrait of a learner. And then finally is the integration of AI concepts and some tools. Learners do need exposure to AI and an understanding of how it works and doesn't work in the context of their learning and lives, and not just in like a separate classroom. And then finally, I like to remind people of avoiding some common AI pitfalls, right? Thing number 1 is please do not just put more kids on more computer programs. Like the AI readiness skills required need kids to build human relationships and to see other people and work with them. So don't hear what I'm saying as buy a whole ton of AI learning apps and have that be the whole experience. Teachers actually do a really incredible job at building those human relationships that are critical. The second thing is I would urge everyone, kids and adults alike, to not give up their thinking to AI. So I've seen people literally on television, for example, get divorced because the AI told them to. And that doesn't make sense, right? Like, we have to keep our own critical thinking and knowledge at the fore, and we cannot allow our human thinking skills and judgment to be given across the AI, which also means we have to train our young people to know how to embrace their own thinking and their own agency. A third one is not to let tools lead instruction or program design. So programs and what you want to do for kids comes first. Tools have to support that. So not the other way around. When we center the tools, we forget about the kids. And then finally, and I put this as a final note, not because it's the last and least important thing, but it's very critical, is to be very cautious about data security. People should not share personally identifiable information or sensitive information with an AI tool. There are some exceptions where a tool has been walled gardened off, but you should generally, unless you know that for sure, we should not be putting information about children's or IEPs or any of that sort of stuff in any sort of AI tool. So think about just whatever you would put out into the public is what you would want here as well. So with that, I'll close, and I'll open it up for any questions and answers or comments that the board would like.
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation and for being here this morning. We'll get started with Ms. Marin.
Good afternoon. This is really cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a few kind of general themes I'd like to ask about and share with my colleagues and staff. So I think it's very helpful to know the 3 different themes of how AI is being discussed in education. I primarily hear about how do we keep students from cheating and plagiarizing.
Yeah.
And I'd like to aspire to something more for our students, and we got to get through that. And the wheel of all the different types makes me think about the definition of organic and natural, right? Like, you got to really know what's really there. I find that it's tough for adults to change. I've really tried to focus on the students are very willing, and interested, and we ask them to change all the time. But it's the adults that have a hard time learning the new way of things. We've seen that a little bit when we were rolling out the new literacy program, a little bit with Schoology in terms of teachers doing it different ways. But to their defense, they have not all been trained in it. So in thinking even just about Schoology and approaching that, like, so I have my 7th grader, and last night we were looking at his stuff, and one teacher lays it out all so well, and everyone else is different. And I just don't think we are there yet with the intentionality of how we lay things out for students to be like, oh, I get it, now I can run with it. Like, we're nowhere near that. The same thing, I think when we talk about transitioning through the schools at times. So that's something, and I do wonder, Dr. Reed, like, so what's the plan? So how are instructional services and our technology office going to work together to, like, what is the plan? Does this infuse our strategic plan that we just had a report on this morning? So that is something I'm wondering. I also, and Mr. Sethi, if you remember, I was asked to be a panelist on a forum that was done by middle schoolers and high schoolers on AI 2 summers ago, I think, and they put the whole thing together at the Capital One Center, and I was like, Gotham, I gotta look smart. What are we gonna do? So that's when I really started, like, learning and trying, and I wanted to do that. But what I ended up talking about was the commons, because as someone in public policy, how do we navigate this space that's always changing, and talking about, well, who's going to put up some guardrails and who's going to make it safe, knowing that it's always changing. And I think, like, if we can think that way and teach our students, like, that more higher level thinking of how are we thinking about the parameters of this, not just how do we implement it, then I could see we start, it's just like with math, that Dr. Reed says, we're doing algebra in kindergarten, right? Like, how do we tease that out into everything so the kids are thinking that way, so they know how to do a prompt when it comes to that, but they also know how to read things and verify before trusting. And to me, really, that gets on leading with integrity. And so really, we're talking about how to teach kids to be good people and be true to one another. And I love that you have democracy in there, because that's really crucial. So those are initial thoughts. And I'd love to hear, Dr. Reed, if you have it all planned out yet.
I do think that I want to remind the board and our community that are watching that we started our Lighthouse Schools program several years ago, and we just launched the year 3 cohort, and that initiation really was to find the penguins that weren't being pushed off, but the penguins that were seeking to jump off early, like Dr. Riley here from our former McLean High School principal. So those schools in year 1 got to pilot some new ideas, concepts, new relationships with technology is what I'll call it, which are not as important as our relationships with one another. But we're in year 3 now, and AI is becoming a much more important part of that. In the handouts that got them handed out, you'll see actually a handbook that our ISD colleagues and Fairfax County Public School colleagues put together a handbook. We're looking at upgrading our SBITS training in terms of becoming ISD certified to be stronger supports to our educational staff. But fundamentally, we want to invite our community into this conversation November 3rd, the evening of November 3rd, for our Meeting the Moment night, to share much of what has been shared today as we frame that experience, Ms. Mayor. And I think we're going to have to be comfortable with a certain amount of fluidity, because this content area and our 22nd century future for children is one that moves very differently than the past that we've traditionally planned for. But we're excited. Again, the Lighthouse Schools have launched this work, and this is year 3. And it's time, right? It's time for us to be clear around our framework in this area.
Thank you. Dr. Anderson.
Thank you. This is definitely very exciting, and trying to contain some of the things that I want to ask about. What I love about this conversation, it's not that we shan't talk about AI and have it be infused in our schools, infused in our tools, because we were certainly there like, oh, let's not do anything because kids will use it to cheat, and that's always been the conversation. So I'm very excited that we've moved away from we can't touch this to how do we get this into our spaces. I really appreciate, I think section, well, they all say A up here, but they were different on what I had on my screen, but I moved away from it, where you talked about do not give up the thinking to AI, because there's a space to use a tool and apply your analytic skills. You're just doing the grunt work by using this tool. And I don't know if we are there yet. My husband, who is a nuclear engineer, came back and showed me at a conference that he attended, a dissertation was done in 45 minutes by AI, something that people take 10 years to do. So the work, it's happening, and a lot faster in other fields than it is here. But my wondering, and I know you talked about the lighthouse schools, Dr. Reed, my wondering is, what is our basic expectation right now? And if it's none, just let me know. It is none. I was actually asked from a constituent in terms of, well, do you have AI regulations and policies? I'm like, I don't think so. I know we talk about it quite a bit, but we have not landed on anything that's on paper. So if you could just touch upon all of those, that'd be appreciated.
Yes, ma'am. I think what we have right now is we have a lot of spontaneous outbreaks of AI use across the school division. And there's not a systems approach to how we're approaching AI across the entire school division. So when we think about the Google pilot, prove, scale model, that was part of what the Lighthouse schools were, initiated around, like a pilot that's contained, then we enlarge. Think autonomous driving cars, right? Originally in a very small parking lot, a larger parking lot that's more complex, eventually San Francisco, and then bring it to scale across the country. So think about AI in Fairfax County Public Schools. We certainly have drafts of a framework, drafts of activities, drafts of thinking, but it's pretty much been limited to a particular department or team, and it's guidance or optional or all those types of things that things are when they're new, if that makes sense. Like the penguin has jumped in, and most of the penguins are still actually alive, right? They haven't all been eaten. So what we're talking about now in terms of meeting the moment is how do we take what we've learned from the work that those teams have done, the Lighthouse schools have done, what other people around the country and world are doing, and really build out our framework to develop a proof of concept that we can then bring to scale, because that is part of our strategic plan. We focus a lot on gaps, and we also need to think about what are our strengths and what are those aspirational characteristics that we want for our children and our community, and this is one of those. I would also add that we have a couple videos that, time permitting, we're able to share about how AI is being used in classrooms in Fairfax now, and be happy to maybe show one of those now that you think would be appropriate at this juncture.
If I could just finish my turn.
Sure, yes, ma'am.
I would be appreciative to see those videos, but that's also my wondering, because you do have those spontaneous outbreaks, as you call it, so the disease does exist in certain places. And we know that teachers are utilizing some of the tools, because I know that they can tell when students are using AI in their work, because we've had parents come to us at the board meeting to talk about that. So the tool's already there. I guess what I'm looking is for the pivot. How do we start to teach kids to use it as a information gathering rather than a work generating tool, so that they can still have access to what everybody else has access to? Because you can't ask me anything without me putting in a ChatGPT, trying to figure out what's happening every single day. I did it with Carl on the phone just last week. We were talking about the PLAs. Like, oh, what do they say about it? Well, ChatGPT says there are pros and cons. It's automatic for me right now, and I would imagine for the digital natives who are my children and those coming after him, it's even more innate. How do we teach them to use that for good, kind of like now, because they're in it?
Well, I think that's where we were talking earlier. AI doesn't substitute for our own ability to think critically, and we have to when we look, whether we're looking at pictures that just kind of raise a question, or we read arguments that make no sense, or, I mean, know that AI hallucinates, right? It makes things up at times. Nothing is going to substitute for critical thinking on the part of our young people, but I'll defer to our AI experts across the way here. I will also say, though, as ChatGPT to me is to English in some ways in thinking as calculators were to mathematics early on. And you still see students calculate a certain math problem that has the most outrageously wrong answer, and they'll write it down without, like, wait a minute, did you stop and think whether that makes sense, right? Like, because they maybe hit a wrong decimal point or whatever. And so we still have to make sense even when we use a tool. Does that really, pass the sniff test, I guess, for lack of a better way? But Mr. Sethi, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's a good segue to the videos as examples, but go ahead.
So just to quickly add to sort of what we have been doing and where we are headed, right? We have seen AI being used primarily as a consumption tool. We see that all of us individually, collectively, we use it to consume something. It produces something for us, we demand something, and it produces an answer, we run with it. What we would love to bring, and actually we're bringing with the handout in your flyer, you will see we have sparked a partnership with Amazon and PlayLab, and we are sparking a hackathon, which is essentially going to allow our students, high school students at this point, to be able to use tools to create. Right? That moment where they can go from understanding this is just not consumption, but creation, to problem solve for something bigger, larger, that they're passionate about. I feel like it starts creating that opportunity for both our students and our adults to say, how do we use these technologies in the future? And it is still evolving. It is still moving fast. It still changes on a daily basis. I think Ms. Marin was asking about how do we put the guardrails. We have access to tons of tools. There's a vendor every day who shows up and says, hey, this tool is the best tool. Why don't you use this tool, put it in front of your students? And we've been holding down the fort, right? We are not ready. It doesn't matter. Even if your tool is safe, we don't know how this is going to get used and what it will be used for. If our adults are not ready to use the tools in the classrooms, then we are not willing to open the gates and say, just enable the tool for students. We do want our adults in the system to learn everything about every tool that we can enable for them, which is why it's really focused on adult AI literacy, so we can at least have a shared and common understanding across the division of that concept. But we have some good examples, and let us show the video if we can. There are early clips from schools who had kind of used these tools that have been.
Our 5th and 6th grade students are being introduced to AI through a template lesson from Adobe Express. They are generating images of themselves using descriptive language to see how accurate of a portrait they can create. Once students have finished their projects, they share it to a classroom gallery where everybody can see each other's work. This creates a great visual of how accurate, or in many cases inaccurate, the AI imagery is. Seeing that these faces look similar to their classmates but aren't quite right generates a great discussion about how AI is a tool to help us with our work, not a replacement for doing the work ourselves. It's important that we edit, check references, and make the work our own.
My name is Megan Keene, and I am an ML teacher at Holmes Middle School. I am part of the Lighthouse Schools Initiative. I created this storybook using Google Gemini after attending our Lighthouse Schools kickoff on September 22nd, 2025. My sheltered English 6 class has been learning about John Muir through the Benchmark Advanced curriculum. I created this storybook to help my students see how the past connects to the future. First, I asked Gemini about storybooks, and it gave me questions to answer to start creating the book. And then I added the age range of my students. Gemini created a fun story about a girl named Sierra who was relatively the same age as my students. This was a great connection to the Sierra Club, which was founded by John Muir. These are some samples of the storybook that was created. When Mel Malik asked us about using AI in our classroom, I shared this storybook with her. She told me that she was able to translate it into French, and so I ran with that idea and translated it into the languages of my students. The languages represented are Dari, Turkish, and Spanish. Each student will receive a book in their home language as well as one in English.
At Langley High School, the Honors Biology team transformed research projects, all thanks to Google Notebook LM and Gemini. Notebook LM became our project's brain, effortlessly organizing everything from research sources to student feedback. Its power to instantly create summaries and mind maps made it a breeze to bring new teachers up to speed. But the real magic? How it positively impacted student learning. This wasn't just about biology. It was about building vital research skills that students can carry into any subject. Gemini helped us brainstorm, craft clear instructions, and even perfect our project rubric. We used it to survey students, analyze their feedback, and continuously refine our approach. This meant better instructions, smarter timelines, and lessons perfectly tailored to student needs. Integrating AI streamlined development, making projects richer and more engaging. Students gain valuable, transferable skills, setting them up for success far beyond the science classroom. That's the power of AI in education.
Tools that we have enabled for our staff to use, their learning opportunities, and being able to enable that to integrate into the classroom in the ways only they know and they can see. I don't think anyone from any central office team can say, use this to do X, and that is the same X everywhere. And that's sort of the power of this stuff. Once you plant the seed and let them use it, when they have their aha moment with it, we have seen this happen over and over again. You probably all have individually seen it too. When you have that aha moment, like, I get it, I know I can use this to leverage and push forward in a certain direction which supports my work and helps build on it, that's when it happens. And this momentum is something that you get to by testing, experimenting, learning on your own. I don't know if there's a PD that we can do collectively, which everyone just suddenly gets it. But that's the thinking, that's the scaling strategy right now.
Thank you. Ms. Sizemore-Heiser.
I have to confess, I'm actually very excited about this. I'm super excited about this. I've actually was developing an AI forum topic, and then I heard that this was coming, so I stopped developing the AI forum topic because it was here. A couple things, I will just sort of frame this. I know a lot of people, there's a lot of nervousness around AI and fear of it. I think of this similar to when I started working at my law firm when I was a young graduate from law school. And there were not very many people in my law school classes that had a laptop. I had a laptop. I took my notes on the laptop. Showed up as a young lawyer, and all of the partners had computers with docking stations, and half the partners used their computer monitor to put Post-its on. And I'm not that old, so that wasn't that long ago. So to think from that world where we're using computer monitors for Post-its to what computing is in every workplace now is what I see the promise of AI. And we still have jobs, and we've made advances in technology and all sorts of advances that I probably couldn't have imagined as a young lawyer. And so I don't think of this as much different than that moment when computing became infused in every workplace, or the calculator became infused in every workplace. I think what we are doing now is very smart, which is setting our students up so that they're not the partners with Post-its on a computer monitor, but the associate who can type our own briefs. And that's how my analogy for this. I have been talking for a long time, including, do you know how much I pushed on our grading policy to make sure that we were assessing our portrait of a graduate skills? Because I have said for a long time that the most important skills that our students have is a core base of knowledge. So when they put things into AI, they know whether it's right or wrong, or how to look it up or research it and check. But also critical thinking, analysis, collaboration, teamwork, right? Those are the things that set us apart. And this is something you've heard me say. So I am thrilled that of your presentation talking about that. What I'd like to know more about, and I'll just say on a side note, I'm a college professor, so we see this all the time. And I don't think it's the fear, you take away cheating by changing your assessments, right? What I've done in my students' papers is I just say, okay, go use AI and then tell me what it got right and what it got wrong, and where in the textbook is the source material for what it says and how you would change it. And I make it analyze what AI gives me. That's changing the assessment. So there's lots of opportunity here. But I guess the first question I have is not just changing how we're teaching in our core academic subjects, but how do we emphasize getting more infusion of the subjects that where students are focusing more on the communication, collaboration, critical thinking skills into our teaching of core academics. And I'm thinking in particular of theater classes where I learned a lot of these skills. And I'll talk more about that because my time is almost up. Infusing that type of teaching methodology into our core academics so students learn those skills naturally and without it kind of being forced. So I'll stop there. I'll have like 17 go-backs, please. I'm excited.
So something, I was in New Hampshire giving a talk to 400 teachers the other day, and I asked a question of how many of you plan your lessons based on content that you need to get across to children? Every single hand went up. Great, wonderful, step one. Then I asked the question, how many of you teach skills like critical thinking, like perseverance, and those sorts of things in your lessons as well? Every single hand went up. I'm like, wonderful. If I looked at your lesson plan, could I see those skills being taught? Raise your hand if so, and no hands went up. And the reason I bring that up isn't because we don't have the intent or the willingness or the ability, and it's not, what I'm not asking or saying is that by just writing critical thinking on a lesson plan, suddenly it happens, right? But essentially the core design of a learning experience, which we call a lesson, right, can be shifted in ways that aren't really difficult, that actually get back to the core of what teachers love doing and what they came into the teaching profession for, and at the same time get across the content knowledge, which is required by standards and those sorts of things, and build those human skills. So I've seen it happen. I've seen it in classrooms across the country in different ways. I've seen it in Gwinnett with our AI work that we had been doing. And one other thing is that there's a student actually from our AI high school that I was chatting with yesterday. I'm going to call her Morgan for our sake. But Morgan had been through 3 years of this AI high school, and someone asked her the question, we were preparing for a panel, and someone asked her the question, what about cheating? Like, what about cheating? What about like losing capabilities with AI? And she kind of looked at the person like they had 3 heads. And I'm like, Morgan, please explain what that look is for. She's like, that's a conversation from a long time ago. Like, we have realized that if you're just using it to cheat, you're not really using it for what it's for. And so it doesn't even cross our mind as that being a primary use case. You're supposed to use AI for expanding your thinking, for pressure testing your thoughts and your logic flow, for testing your logic, those sorts of things. And so what gives me hope is that there's a generation of young people who are growing up who could potentially view it as a tool in that way to really expand their capabilities if we inspire them and let them do that.
Okay. Ms. Dixit, followed by Mr. McDaniel.
Thank you for the presentation. Obviously, it was very welcoming, and all the school board members, we really like learning and hopefully implementing more AI in our schools. When you mentioned about the AI high school, that might be the direction in one of the schools we might take that route. Could you let me know a little bit as how does that work?
Sure. So in Gwinnett County Public Schools, we did we're a county that's growing in population. And so we had the need for additional seats. And so we were creating another neighborhood school, so not a specialty school or a magnet school or anything like that. And our question was essentially, could we create a theme in this school that would enable it to be a test bed for the rest of the school system? And in our case, this test bed was around AI readiness. And this was before ChatGPT and those sorts of things, so many people thought we were a little crazy back then. But as the sort of world advanced and things moved along, people became increasingly supportive and interested in, okay, what does that mean? So what it meant for us, and I'm going to be very, very clear that I personally believe that school designs should be held and owned by community members who are giving a lot of input, by neighborhoods and families, in addition to teachers and other people. So it's not like we had one brilliant mind at the top that said, hey, this is a school and it worked for everybody. What we ended up creating was a framework for AI readiness, which was not just about the technology, but around many of the skills. So things like creative problem solving, ethical thinking, and those things alongside data science, mathematical reasoning, applied experiences, robotics, those sorts of things. And we use that shell to essentially say, how would we create a school where kids are prepared to swim, snorkel, and scuba dive in the age of AI based on that framework? And what that meant in practice was that for the scuba divers, we were like, okay, we need a set of AI classes that they can take and dive deep into the sort of deep knowledge around AI. And so we built that. So we built a career and technical education sequence of courses for the state of Georgia that were used by our county. We're the first ones to use it in our state that would do that for our scuba divers, right? At the same time, we realized if we do that and only that, we'll end up in the same place that like computer science ended up, which was like this one-off room to the side that most kids didn't have access to. And so we started looking at the swimmers and the snorkelers, and we started looking at how do you upgrade every single lesson plan every day to start incorporating a lot of these AI concepts into it, right? And so that's when we got to the point where whether you were in a biology class or an English class or whatever, chemistry class, whatever class you're in, you are actually getting pieces of that core AI framework as part of your teaching and learning experience of that day. And then we didn't just do the high school, we actually worked it all the way back to K-8 feeder pattern. And the big thing that was the sort of the trick that's the hard part is that because AI is changing all the time, you can't just do this once and then you're done. We actually created systems within our school to make sure that lessons and things like that could be constantly updated and upgraded as the technology progressed, as the kids knew more, et cetera, et cetera. And so, yeah, so I want to say the school is in year 4 now and doing really, really well. It's a very popular school. The sort of local area has grown significantly in population. And at the same time, it meets the needs of every type of learner that you could imagine.
Thank you for the information. Do you guys have AI labs within the school where students are taking problems and then trying to solve it, coming up with their own solutions?
So the interesting thing is, as we were building our school out originally, we thought we'd need these like big footprint labs, similar to how you might need large computer labs and things like that. But as ChatGPT started coming out and as we started realizing that the primary interface for AI for especially kids of high school age was going to be any device, we realized it was actually better not to create pure AI labs because it would give the signal that you should only do AI when you're in that room, as opposed to AI is infused in part of how you think about everything across the curriculum. Now, that said, we did build specialized spaces for like robotics and some of our advanced manufacturing things and those sorts of pieces, because those require like very specific facilities. But in terms of the AI, like the AI specific piece, those would use those spaces, and they just as much use the drama and art spaces for the AI work as well.
Thank you. You know, before we used to say math is in everything. Now we are saying AI is in everything, pretty much like right now. Every day we use AI in all the social media or our personal work. I have an example of Brazil. We recently used AI-powered robotics tree planters, which basically doing reforestation for them. This is the kind of critical thinking and thoughts-provoking ideas we want to, give it to our students, that these are the problems. There's a deforestation happening, or there is some disease which is incurable still in this age, and come up with a solution. So for me, AI is more of like solve the problems, and that's the thought we want to give it to our students. So how do we get this information and get those tools to kids to, I don't know if ChatGPT is the right answer, but.
Yeah, I think this is very timely. We gave out a folder, and we will also send it electronically. That competition we're running for our students sparks that basis of creativity, right? We call it Seize the Moment, in alignment with Meeting the Moment, where we are encouraging our students to create with AI as opposed to just consume. So if you all have an opportunity to kind of push this out to the high schools and have them participate, it has prizes associated with it. So the coaches are getting compensated for it, and it's a partnership with Amazon and PlayLab, which are 2 private entities. But that's sort of the beginning of it. And there's additional work that will happen on the back end of when we learn from how do we run this, how do we spur creativity, how do we encourage the adults to support our students' thinking, and then how do we bring it forward so we can highlight to the world the great talent we have within our division and our system.
Yes, thank you so much, Gautam. I think lastly, I would just say that piloting idea with one school and then taking it to all schools is what I think is the way to go, because each and every students in our FCPS should have access to these tools and these opportunities. That's the equity point. We have to make sure that we absolutely give it to every student after we do the initial pilot. So I'll stop there. Thank you again.
Thank you. Mr. McDaniel, followed by Mr. Moon.
Thank you. Good stuff. I will confess that I have forced my staff to be using AI on almost a daily basis now to help analyze different stuff that comes out. But the other day, my kindergartner came home and we had a little update on her math progress so far. And she's struggling to tell the difference between squares and rectangles, which I guess is kind of understandable for a 6-year-old. You know, they all kind of look the same-ish, but not really. So my first inclination was to go online and print off some worksheets and sit down and work with her. Then I said, wait a minute, I bet you there's something out there where I can develop an online quizzing system that I can sit with her and walk her through it. And sure enough, there is a tool to do that. And it tailors as you go, and it really drills into the weakness areas and helps her. So I say all that to say, this is focused right now on the classroom, but there's 2 other areas where we can be infusing AI. That's one, helping parents help their students and helping parents navigate the educational experience of their kids. And the second area, which we need to have the conversation around at some point, is the actual administration of the school system and operations. Whether it's finance, HR, I know it was mentioned IEPs, 504s, anything that we do that is very manual, how are we going to infuse these types of tools into those processes in the long run? Because as we all know, dollars are not where they used to be, and we're going to have to continue to squeeze these budgets more, and these types of tools are going to help us accomplish that. So I would welcome any thoughts or feedback there.
I'm just going to double click into that moment where you use the tool first. It's that aha moment that we were talking about, because when you have it, you know where to go and look for it. We are actually starting building capacity on serving content to our parents in terms of giving them ideas of how to engage and work with them, right? We obviously have our Family Academy, which works in hosting online sessions. We are at the starting stages of building an online learning sort of module where parents can come in and take on lessons. And I think it is critical for this. We were discussing this a little while earlier. The social media thing ran out of our hands to the end where we as an institution, even as a country, had to shut down phones in the classrooms. Could we have prevented that if we started this conversation 10 years ago, trying to help parents understand? And granted, we as adults didn't know at this point how far this one can go. So this time around, I think we know better. So we want to start the conversation with our parents. And the one which we really, and I will say this here in this moment so everybody gets this, the anthropomorphization of sort of AI tools where somebody starts believing it is a thing, where it is a person, an individual that they can relate to, and the relationship forming is probably going to be the biggest issue that we'll see rising in the future. And as educators, we can certainly support that, but I think we need our families in this together so they can make sure that they're able to monitor and support the students through that. They need to know it's a machine. It's not a thing. It may know them better. I mean, we know AI tools will repeat back to you whatever you want it to say. The sycophony of it, as the term is used frequently, is very dangerous. And students need to know how to discern, or young kids, adults need to know how to discern that. So our role in helping our parents understand all of those facets early is probably going to be much larger than the previous cycles we have with technology.
Thank you, Mr. Moon.
Thank you. I'm glad that we are having this discussion today. I think the first time I brought this to the attention of a superintendent was about 1.5 years ago when I got so excited after returning from attending a conference up in New York related to AI. With that said, it has taken, to me, way too long to have this conversation. And I'm hoping that the next conversation, the conversation we'll have after this one is not going to take another 1.5 years, because for most of us, our terms as a school board member is going to end. Perhaps if it's going to take another 1.5 years. So from a school board member's perspective, at least this one person's perspective, we make policy decisions, we make budgetary decisions. We're not going to go into minute detail of how this should be run by superintendent or the school system. So we'll want to know what decisions on what timeline, superintendent or other senior staff envisioning for us to do. What kind of work do you expect the school board members to do? I am not an educator. I will not be able to claim that I know much about AI either. I hear a lot about the benefits of using AI, and I see some, cases that how they are being used in the school system, and as also Mr. McDaniel suggested, how perhaps, one of the areas I have a keen interest in is how we can use AI to improve our operation as well, to perhaps generate more savings, cost savings, or provide more efficiency in our operation, etc. But again, going back to the role of a school board member, what decision do you expect the school board to make?
Well, today, no decision today. This is a presentation to level set so that we're all clear about the conversation that we're having when we talk about AI. It's also the first time as a board that and a superintendent are having this conversation. So I think it's very important to be thoughtful about what are the possibilities, to think about the buckets that this work sits in, both in operations, in the classroom, in staff usage. I think that down the road, the policy setting around AI is definitely something I would expect the board to determine, because I think the policy determines what comes to scale across the school division and what's available then across every neighborhood in the county. So I think as we involve our community, November 3rd will be our first community conversation dedicated solely to AI. By the end of this year, it's our expectation that we have a framework, and we have a good start at that already, and we need to have a framework that cuts across all departments, that the board has conversation about, so that we can bring to scale the use of AI across the three topic areas. I don't know about snorkeling, swimming, and scuba diving, but I can get there probably. But I think that we need to think about, by policy, what's the minimum expectation everywhere? What are the guardrails the board's willing to live with to allow the system? Essentially, what is our sandbox, right, as a system to develop new ideas and new practices? So I see all of that coming at some point later this year.
That's exciting. Later this year, by the end of this year is 2 months, three months from now.
I'm
less
talking
than 3 months.
academic year. Nice try.
All done.
Thinking by June.
My effort has just failed to push superintendents on a little, faster timeline, but that is better than year and a half, another year and a half. However, next time when I see this, I would love to see some sort of recommendations from superintendent for the board to start making some decisions rather than keep putting this off. I'm sure that this is fast-changing technology, and there are a lot of things unknown out there. By the time superintendent comes back, by the end of the school year, not calendar year, right. Things might have already changed, and then, they may be forced you to change your own recommendations to us. However, we gotta start making decisions. That's how I see it. Otherwise, we'll never get there. So with that said, could you put me on go back?
Yeah, to Mr. Moon's point, I just want to clarify too, the important way in which to shape this topic area is going to be building in the maximum flexibility that we're comfortable with because of the nuanced, nimble agility we need to have to really maximize planning for our children's future and not our past.
Thank you. Ms. St. John Cunning.
Thank you. I know some board members were here a few years ago, and I know I participated in an initiative that I think has since been shelved, where we were going to try to make all of our schools adopt the making of the mind footprint or framework, which really focuses on 7 essential life skills that children need. And when I look at your slide 19, it really reflects those, which is not actually the tool, but the life skills that they need, which include, focus and self-control, perspective taking, critical thinking. And I would like to see if we can consider revisiting that, because as we start looking at it as a tool, we have to manage those life skills for those children, and that's what helps put those guardrails there that so many of us sometimes worry about. So I would like to have the superintendent just think about that.
Thank you. Mr. Dunn.
I think this is an exciting conversation, but I think it's a little amorphous. And so I wanted to ask the superintendent, when will we see a proposal, a plan, and when will we see a budget that goes with that? Because right now we don't necessarily have the federal funding to feed hungry kids or provide kids with special needs with all the support that they need. So, I'm always excited to go off on adventures, but I want to make sure we're doing it in a fiscally responsible way, given the funding shortfall that we are facing right now and the funding shortfall we're likely to face come this spring, given the additional needs that will be on the minds of county and state leaders, given reductions in federal funding for everything from Medicaid to affordable housing. So I just want to make sure that, we get excited, but we also approach this from a maximally cost-effective perspective, and also try to not get people so excited that they end up being disappointed that what we roll out turns out to be more limited because we just don't have the dollars to do something grandiose.
Yes, sir. Let me just clarify for all those folks listening, we still are receiving money for our food and lunch program as we're in litigation around those federal dollars, but we are still currently receiving those dollars. I think you raise a really good point, right? It's reckless to think about planning an initiative that we don't have resources to support. I will say that right now there's a significant interest nationally, locally, globally, probably that's not in any great order, but nationally and locally and also globally, around the utilization of AI and the integration of AI into our work and into our education spaces. So there's a significant amount of grant money that's out there right now for us to take advantage of if we're positioned well with a thoughtful plan, as well as partnerships that we're one of the first K-12 school divisions to partner is with the Play Lab partnership. Maybe I'm not using the right word on that, but not Playland. I knew it was a Playmobil.
There's one more, but we're not announcing that.
Oh, we're not announcing. Okay, we're not announcing one of those partnerships, but I think what we want to try to do is make sure that our work in this area is funded, because I agree with you. It's a fool's errand to plan something we really can't support with resources. Having said that, we believe we've identified a number of possible resource areas, and what we want to make sure is that as we shape our direction, we want to make sure we include our community, which is the purpose of the November 3rd evening, and also make sure that your thoughts, feelings as a board, that evening's reflected. We wanted it after this work session so we could take sort of what we heard and frame the conversation that night. So I think it's good to have a cautionary tale, and I appreciate that.
I know this is obvious to everyone, but it doesn't get spoken about enough. Our kids aren't learning handwriting. I've seen handwriting samples recently from high school kids who it looks like, second grade chicken scratch, and that's not good. A lot of our kids don't have access to physical textbooks, and those are preferred by many kids nowadays. I think studies show they're more effective, and I think being humans, we learn best from other human beings, from teachers. And so I think there's a role for AI, there's a role for technology, but I think in our country. We get so excited and obsessed with technology that sometimes we can lose sight of the fundamentals, and we've been losing some of the fundamentals for a couple decades now at least, and we're seeing the effects of that in the social isolation of our kids, anxiety, and other issues. So we need to just be thoughtful as we get excited about yet another kind of technology, that we also start to think about the fundamentals of human-to-human connection and teaching some of the basics of handwriting, personal finance, et cetera, that require us to be successful in our human society.
Thank you. Mr. McElveen.
Thank you, and I appreciate being able to follow some of my colleagues. I really appreciate the presentation. I thought it was very good for level setting. I do think if this is what we present on November 3rd, there's going to be a lot of disappointment. I think I would have liked to see more than just a couple videos about what we're doing as a system on this, and I think others have laid this out, that I think we are doing a lot as a system. It just wasn't reflected here today. So that's the only editorial comment I have, and hopefully we'll have a more robust presentation next time. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson.
Hi there. So I tend to be the penguin that's at the front. I don't mind being pushed into new technologies. I was in the classroom when Wikipedia firmly came out, so I had my kids using a wiki for our class so that if they missed a day that they could go there to find the information, and that was their responsibility as part of the learning in the classroom. I wasn't afraid of it, and I did very much similar to my colleague. I made it part of the assignment, and so that they understood what was going on. I do think that, to my colleague's point related to funding and things like that, I see this as a preparation for the time that we have the funding available to do everything we want to do. The board can start working on policy. We can start setting a framework within the division as to how we want to utilize these tools and start the conversation. I personally love the videos because it gave me an opportunity as a place to see where we've already started and the work that's already being done. So more of those, I think, are amazing touch points. Even in like an old-fashioned poster session at some of the events where you could walk through and see what the different projects are in real life, I think is often helpful. I do think that we are at a moment where it would be beneficial for us to examine what tools we're currently paying for. And I thought that for a long time related to just the sheer volume of different apps and things like that. And what will happen is that we'll have one person or one school that is still heavily invested in something, and we need to figure out how to phase those out. So that way we can open up dollars and funding to move forward. So I would very much like to see more robust discussion about the tools we're already paying for and what our usage is, because that is something that I've never seen, is what the usage of each of these individual tools are. And so I think that that would be, I also anecdotally know that regardless of whether or not we pay for anything related to AI, our students are already using it, our teachers are already using it, and our staff are. So I would very much like us to embrace it as to the beginning. We don't have to be the first penguin to get pushed off the ledge, and we're certainly not, but we could be in the middle of the pack so that we are making solid decisions after we figure out that there are no sharks in the water. So I think that this is a good start to the conversation, and I'm really looking forward to where we go next. And I want to definitely say where we can help. So what are the policies that we need to create? I don't necessarily think that a specific AI policy is the way to go, but a policy about innovation and then allowing regulation to come in makes a whole lot of sense to me. And so creating a policy around embracing innovation within our division, I think, is essential to success. So that's just my thought. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to take a turn as well. I want to commend Fairfax County Public Schools in being ahead of the game in the sense that we already have an SBIT in every one of our schools. I also want to talk about the fact that they're not all being used correctly. And I know we've talked about this, Mr. Sethi, and I commend your office on the IT side and also on the IS side for leaning into this reality. But, our school-based technology specialists, they understand, or they should, that a tool doesn't teach. Teacher teaches. But they can leverage technology to utilize UDL, to differentiate instruction, to make all students can access learning, the inclusion model, the Lighthouse Schools, all of this is intertwined. And I think we're doing fantastic work. And I do appreciate the vignettes, and I do agree with my colleague, Mr. McElveen, that there's a lot more fabulous work being done. I will just say, as someone who attended ISTE, I'm on a lot of communications from different vendors that I went to their booths, and I just got an email recently from a vendor that has free tools for our teachers, and 14,400 AI-supported instructional resources were just last week alone utilized for free. I also still have teachers that lean on this Teachers Teach Us, or there's some website where they pay for other teachers who've created, what's it called? Teachers Pay Teachers. We got to get off that. Our teachers should not be paying for content. But this is a Maserati, and to my colleague's point about cost, yes, we need to be careful, but we've already made that investment in our SPITs. So what I would like to see happen is the relationship between SPITs and principals, which I do know is being a focus area, that principals better understand what an SPITS is there for. Especially in light of the staffing in elementary schools, I'm hearing that some SPITs are sort of being plugged in almost as monitors that were used, and they're far more skilled than that. The ISTE certification is an incredible undertaking, but it requires the artifacts that demonstrate the leveraging of the technology and not tapping into technology to teach. I also find it apropos that we're going to be talking about decision points. We're going to talk later about the Western High School. So to that point, I have a question for our guest related to Gwinnett County and the AI school. It's 4 years in. Is that trickling now into the rest of the schools within Gwinnett? Was that a jumping off point? Because that very much excites me in terms of an opportunity we might have in front of us.
Sure. So yes, it is trickling into the other parts of the schools, and here's how. And we had always, and keeping in mind that I'm not with Gwinnett County Public Schools right now, but I had been and led the work there. The theory of action for all our new schools was that you build an innovation within one place, and then you actively figure out what pieces of that innovation go elsewhere, right? And so at this point in Gwinnett County Public Schools, the AI pathway that I talked about, that's the 3-course pathway for the deep divers, has been expanded to 2 other schools already that are actually hubs for many other schools to access. And we're looking at how that goes even further from there. But more importantly than that, there are core aspects of our framework around robotics, around computer science, where every school, including every elementary school, for example, has a robotics team and robotics conversations. There's computer science at every single grade level in every single school. So like the combination of the AI readiness part is both the explicit AI development work and the future readiness stuff, and is being treated sort of as an imperative for everywhere without enforcing a cookie cutter. Now you're going to do the same thing that school did, and it's like meeting the moment and the need of each of the communities.
Thank you. And the last thing I'll say, because I'm going to be out of time, is in terms of SPITs. You know, having worked in a high school, I felt like my SPITs spent so much time dealing with Schoology and SIS and not instruction. And so I'm hoping the technologies that are within those tools are better, and they don't need to be in the weeds on that with supporting teachers, but they can start to support instruction, which is why they're there. So we're going to do go-backs, and because we do not have a lot of time, I'm going to give people a minute, and I'll start with Ms. Marin.
Okay, well, first, I'd like to know how other school divisions are approaching this. Let's think about the governance and what informs our board. We also need to be experiencing, discussing this. How do we help all kids snorkel? That should be what we're talking about at least monthly, right? But the good news is that we can plan our own agendas so we can actually make that happen. What I find so tough is this is juxtaposed against the incredible reality of public education. So I have a little part of my brain being like, yeah, innovation, this is great. And then I've got, wow, we're just trying to get money and survive and like teach all kids, and the needs are increasing, and there's a teacher shortage and our facility funding. But then also there's a little bit of but we're used to building things as we do it. But then we're also FCPS, and sometimes we don't roll out things all at the same time, but we have experience rolling out things. So this is about teaching adults, right? It's about teaching adults so they can teach kids. And we teach a lot of adults all the time. But we could do better. I'd like to ask the board what the non-negotiable investments of money and time are. We can direct the superintendent this Thursday with the executive limitation on financial planning to come back with that list of all the apps. We can do it through a budget question. And last thing I'll say is we spend a lot of time and money getting rid of materials that were not up to our standards of quality when it comes to social studies and other things. I'm very uncomfortable with now teachers could just, you know, we got to still make sure they meet our quality level, our level of cultural inclusivity, of historical accuracy. Yeah, that's, I wish I had like 2 more minutes, but there we go. So for my colleagues to consider.
I'm going to give Ms. Mayer another minute.
And
everyone has 2 minutes because there's only 3 go-backs.
Okay. Okay, to regroup, governance, okay? We all need to have presentations like this way more often. We need to understand what's happening. I would say, what's some low-hanging fruit? Can the board start using a tool very explicitly? Let's give ourselves an assignment. Let's do that work. Again, hard to make the brain space to be creative when we're just trying to survive. The materials, we've got to be thoughtful about what's in front of students and also what's in front of parents and families, because we know with Benchmark Advance, parents don't always see those consumables, right? So now we're talking about teacher-created materials in class. That's one class. Another class, how are parents supposed to keep up? I can't even find my 7th and 10th graders' materials online. Now we're going to have creation of whole new things. We got to think that through. Again, the non-negotiable investments. So the board, like, we can make this decision, you guys. We can look at what we're paying for, and like Ms. Anderson said, stop paying for those things. But we have to do that work. So I'm happy to submit the budget question, or I'm happy for us to do a follow-on this Thursday for financial planning, which is this Thursday, and see what we can do. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Sizemore-Heiser.
So I kind of sketched, well, before I get into my sketch, I want to ask a couple questions. One of the things that I've been talking about for the last few months is AI adjacent jobs, which is just a phrase I made up. It may be a thing or not. But, you know, when we talk about AI can do all these things, well, someone has to prompt it. And I know prompt engineer is already a job that exists, right? I think about AI compliance and ethicists. Companies are going to need to have compliance rules within their companies and these are not necessarily technical jobs, but they're jobs for communicators, they're jobs for marketers, there's lots of other things, right? Have we thought about how to build skills for what I'm terming AI adjacent jobs, and jobs in the workplace where AI is going to become a tool to augment that work? I can tell you from having young adult children that I have children who are being measured now on their use of AI in their workplace. So what's the thought on that first, or the training for that?
So I like what you just said around every job is AI adjacent, because that's the reality. It's not even adjacent anymore. The AI is part of the workflow across the board, so that's really important. So no matter what job someone wants or what area, there are aspects of and impacts of AI. And if we recall the pieces around life, right, there are big decisions being made by utilizing AI algorithms and things like that our populace just needs to be aware of and able to make the right voting choices, for example, as a voter related to those things, right? And so that's really critical. You are correct that there's a whole new infrastructure of jobs emerging that are directly AI adjacent that didn't exist previously because AI didn't exist before. And I like your pieces around like publicists and things like that in the AI arena, or AI law ethicists in the AI arena. So there are a lot of things like that. To my knowledge, I haven't run across anyone who has deeply built out and mapped out what all those jobs are, because they're still emerging as such. But I think that's a very important point.
Okay, so I kind of sketched out this plan as we were talking. It's very, very rough. How do we the funding is an important piece, right? But I think we need to have the plan to know what we need to fund, and then figure out, well, maybe we can pull from other places like the million apps we have or whatever. But how do you have AI education infused in core subjects in such a way that it becomes a tool that we know how to use as opposed to a tool that's using us? right? How do we conceive what is our core knowledge or content that everyone needs to know? What are the skills in life? I like life, democracy, and industry, which includes what I call these AI-adjacent jobs we're preparing our kids for. And then what are the skills that are the portrait graduate skills that are even more important now in an AI-adjacent world? What's the plan of building out what those pieces are, right? What we're preparing them for, and the skills they need to have to get there. And then how do we infuse that? I love the idea of a pilot that we then expand upon, a pilot AI high school. But to me, it's like, what's the core content? The plan to teach critical thinking skills and looking at how we teach them perspective taking, collaboration, self-regulation, agency, teamwork, critical thinking. Our job is to prepare students for the future that they're going to walk into, not the past that we came from. So what's the plan to do that, and the grant and funding training and the PD for our teachers and our families to go along? I'll stop there. I'm saying I would love to see that someday. I don't think you have that today. I wouldn't expect you to have that today, but that's what I think we need to build towards.
I agree, and we also, I think, as Babak was saying, we need to involve our community in that conversation, and that's why I'm really looking forward to November 3rd, to have our community join us as we shape the trajectory of this work.
Thank you. Dr. Anderson. Followed by Ms. Anderson.
Yeah, just very briefly, the conversation here definitely has revealed that we have a lot of thoughts. We have a lot of ideas as a board in terms of, at least as individual members, in terms of where we want this to be. This, to me, is the starting point of a draft of a policy, because we don't have that yet. I had whispered that to Ms. Marin on the side, but I felt compelled to just share. We have some things that we could start putting down onto paper. It doesn't mean it's the last and final policy, but at least it is a start. Where it is that we want this to be. Because our policy is not only our communication to the public, but it's our directive to the superintendent. This is the opportunity for us to do that. So I would hope that all of these thoughts are being gathered, that are being articulated here, to help bring this to governance in the very near term.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson.
So we have spent at least all of this year so far working on the urgent. And what I see this is working on the important. And the important is the oxygen that keeps us going. It's like the thing that gets us all excited and makes us want to do work that is so important for the division moving forward. I do think that we have an opportunity here to define what future ready actually means in a real way, because the idea is we have some of the theoretical already, right? POG does that. It could be that it needs an update related to new things that are happening. But then we have this like practical aspect of Future Ready that is very, when the kids walk out the door, we want them to be able to do these things. And so I do think that maybe expanding the definition of what we mean by Future Ready is probably going to be extremely important as we move forward with the discussion. And this is where effectively surveying or talking to kids, or we can get feedback from those people in industry. Like this is a place where we can gain partnerships. So I really think that this is the opportunity that will create something. We need to be innovative here. It's not just that we're expecting the kids to be innovative. So they will always be innovative, and the adults just need to follow their leads. So I'm very excited to see where this is going. To some of my colleagues' points about how this work is going to move forward, we're going to need to talk about that. We've been talking for a while about whether or not we needed another standing committee related to some sort of technology focus or innovation in education, that kind of thing. And I think that this is leading towards that discussion, because I'm not sure that it's fair to just put one more thing on governance in terms of trying to determine the full path forward here. So.
All right, and thank you again for being here, IT, and for you, sir. We appreciate your time, and we're going to transition now to the presentation on the new Western High School after a 5-minute break.